made it up to Eis Hey. And Eis Dalet, the Rebbe explained the Indian Veata tetzave, and how the Kabbalah Satar at the time of Purim was greater than the Kabbalah Satar at the time of Kabbalah Satar itself, because of the Mesiras Nefesh of Purim. The Kosis, the crushedness of Golus, brought about the revelation of Ma'or, the Etzem and the Neshama. And that's the explanation of Kosis L'Ma'or. The crushedness of Golus brings about a revelation of Ma'or. Now that left us with a question. The question is, we now say that ultimately there are two different realities that seem to be playing into the revelation of our Amunah. Moshe Rabbeinu on one hand, the Raya Mehemna, and Kosis Lamar on the other. So if we're in a state of Golus, so then why do we need Moshe per se? Right? The crushedness of Golus should bring about a revelation of Etzem and Neshama. Okay. That was the last thing we saw. We want to know what is the relevance of Kosis Lamar to the Indian of Raya Mehemda, that Moshe is Zan Ufarnes as Amunah should be Yisrael, Shiyeh B'Pnimius. Okay, that's what we want to know. Right? Zayder? That's where we are. So if we can't go further unless we know that. Do we know what I just said? Does what I just said make sense?
What is Raya Mehemna?
What is Raya Mehemna? Amna, where have you been, man? What is Raya Mehemna?
If you translate, maybe I will know.
No. You did not grow up knowing English and you figured it out. you were younger then. Raya Mehemna. Make a kviyash benefesh that this language that we're learning is going to enter into your head and you're going to remember it just like you remember English and whatever other languages you speak, because I'm sure it's not the only one. Right? You speak all these languages, so add one.
Yeah.
Right? Raya Mehemna happens to be Aramaic, right? A shepherd of faith. Right? We can explain the connection of Moshe and Kosis Lamar based on that which is well known. Now, where is it well known? If you look at footnote 31. Well, I tell you what, let's read what it is that's well known before we see what its source is. It's very interesting. That which the Jewish people are ma'aminim belukus. We asked the question, when we said Veata tetzave means that Moshe connects the Jewish people to our Ein Sof, so we don't understand, because the Jewish people are essentially connected to the Eibishter by virtue of the fact that we are all ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. That's just who we are. So our answer was that Moshe brings that emunah into Pnimius. That was our explanation of that issue. Okay. So now, what is the source of this emunah of these people called Jews? Where does it come from? What is it? The Jew has absolute emunah in the Eibishter. He doesn't need proof. Doesn't have to be convinced intellectually that there's an Eibishter. It's a birthright. Where does that come from? It's for two reasons. Right? And those two reasons we'll see in the next 3-4 lines. Then we'll see footnote 31, because footnote 31 tells us where do these two states come from, where these two different levels come from. I mean, how do we know about them? So the first level is Lafisha Mazlayu Chozi. Their mazel sees. Now that's borrowing a statement from a story of Daniel, that Daniel was in a particular house with all sorts of people, and the Malach came into the house and no one saw the Malach except Daniel, and so the Gemara says, Mazlayu Chazi, their mazel saw the Malach. Their conscious self didn't, but their mazel did. Okay, so Chassidus borrows that term to relate to the level of neshama that, interesting enough, the Rebbe is not going to use these words relative to these levels. In a footnote later on, footnote 60-something, the Rebbe does use the words chaya and yechida. You and I use those words all the time, describing the 4th and 5th level of neshama from the bottom up, right? Or the 1st and 2nd level of neshama from the top down, right? So chaya and yechida are two levels of the neshama that are not clothed in the body and are makif, Yechid isn't exactly makif. That's what we'll see now. And Mazli Chazi relates to the level of neshama called Chaya Shebenefesh. Right? 5 levels of soul. What are the 5 levels of the soul from the bottom up? Slowly. Nefesh, responsible for action. Ruach, responsible for speech. Midos. Neshama. Those are the responsible for seichel. Those are the 3 different levels of neshama that are clothed in the body. The next level, Chaya Shebenefesh, which is Mazli Chazi. Where is your Chaya Shebenefesh? As you're sitting down here, I know it's up there. That doesn't mean anything if you're learning Chassidus. If you're not learning Chassidus, you say up there and everyone goes, ooh, but if you're learning Chassidus, you want to know the address. Okay? So Chaya Shebenefesh is a makif. It's responsible for what we would call rotzon, your rotzon for elokus, your innate natural desire to be connected to the Eibishter comes from that place. And as we are sitting down here, where is our Chaya Shebenefesh? It's in a place called Atzilus. Chaya Shebenefesh hangs out in Eilam Atzilus. Okay, what does it do up there? Sees a lot of godliness up there. Okay, Mazli Chazi, it sees elokus, b'muchash, in a real way. Okay, so there's that aspect of our neshama that's there. I mean, that's me. That's part of me. It's just a superconscious part of me. And I'm not so powerfully connected to that part of me because I don't live there. I live here. Right? And so that's why that's going to be a makif. Right? And it might be necessary to bring that down into my conscious reality. Okay, but that level of you and me exists as we are down here, so there's a level of us up there. That's now, the Rebbe, interesting enough, does not use the words Chaim Yechida at any point in the body of the mind. No, at no point. Right? Which is really interesting. Right? Okay? In Tanya, those 2 levels of neshama are not discussed. Tanya talks about nefesh, ruach, neshama. That's it. Are they hinted at in Tanya? Yes, they're hinted at in Tanya. The fact that the Alter Rebbe says that a Jew cannot separate from the Eibishter, not that he doesn't want to, but he can't. So that's a hint to the existence of the next level. We're going to see the essence of the soul. But at no point in Tanya does the Rebbe talk about Etzem and Neshama. There's no point in Tanya does the Rebbe talk about Chaya Shebenefesh. Everything in Tanya is Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. That's what's talked about in Tanya. The highest level talked about is Chochma Shebenefesh. Chochma is Seichel. Neshama. That's Tanya. Chassidus then goes on and explains, my Myron go on and explain higher levels. Where do we see, interestingly enough, where's the first place where we actually see an explicit expression of the other 2 levels of neshama, specifically Yechidah neshama? We're going to see the footnote from Tafrei Shayin Beis. Interestingly enough, why it took that long for it to be expressed explicitly is really interesting. Such an unbelievably important point in Chassidus. It's one of the first things that everybody learns when they learn Chassidus, but you won't find it in the Alter Rebbe.
Do you find it in Zohar?
No, it's Chassidus. It's revealed in Chassidus.
So, Rabbi,
So, Meisha.
Is mazel being related, is that like a hint at Chaya, basically? It's like another word for
But
it?
Mazli Chazar means Chaya Shebenefesh sees elokus. That's what it means.
Okay.
In Chassidus, that's just how it's. Meaning that term was borrowed by Chassidus to talk about that level of neshama.
Okay.
Now it's not the medrash in that whole sugya is not talking about levels of soul. It's just saying some level of these people. But it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious from the content of the medrash that some superconscious level of them saw this, right? Because the whole idea is they didn't see it.
Yeah.
Consciously, they did not see the malach, but there was some level in which they were aware of the malach's presence in their midst.
Okay.
That's called mazli chazi.
Can you say Yechida is Etzem and Neshama?
Yechid is the name for Etzem and Neshama. We're going to distinguish between those 2 levels at some point, but yes, Yechid is the name for Etzem and Neshama.
And you were saying that Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, that's the body. So what's Chaya Yechida in opposed to that?
The transcendent and all-encompassing levels of soul that are not clothed in the body. The part of us that isn't here. Okay. We learn about Stigani, what's the rope, what's the neshama? Like a rope, okay? So the bottom of the rope is clothed in the body, the top of the rope is connected to the Abraham. Okay. Lefisha mazlayu chazi. And what does that mean? So the Rebbe explains. The neshama shelamayla, the neshama above, elamatzilus, roya elukus, sees elukus. Neshama is feminine, right? Ro'a elukus. Re'iyah shelamayla miseichel. Re'iyah, which is beyond seichel. Re'iyah is chachma. Bina is seichel. Now, chachma, I understand, is the power of seichel. I get it. But the level of chachma is called the level of re'iyah. Right? Bina is the level of intellectual understanding. That's why chachma is higher than bina. That's the highest level Tanya talks about. Now, Tanya doesn't talk about it in terms of chayah shebenefesh, but Tanya talks a lot about chachma shebenefesh, and that's talking about what you and I would say is re'iyah, seeing elokus, which is obviously more powerful than simply understanding intellectually the existence of elokus, because we say seeing is believing. Very, very hard to uproot. It's possible, but it's very hard to uproot a person's connection to something they saw. Hard to convince them that they didn't. Whereas something they understand, relatively easy to convince them that that idea is wrong and that this is the proper understanding of the situation. That's not difficult at all, right? Relatively. Right? Now, obviously, it depends on the person. There's people who will never ever change their mind, but that's an emotional issue, not an intellectual issue. Right? Okay. So if someone has an intellectual understanding of something, so that is a very powerful connection to it, but it's a connection that is relatively easy to undo. Relatively easy to undo, right? If a person saw something, so then that's a connection to that thing that is very difficult to undo, but it's undoable, theoretically, right? Okay? Though they probably won't want, meaning they're going to have a very strong desire to stay connected to that reality that they saw because it's so real for them. Is it theoretically possible to change their understanding? Yes. Famous experiment in the 50s, and when you say Harvard School of Psychology in the 50s, you're talking about early days of a school of psychology anywhere, right? And what was one of the most famous experiments? I mean, why is it one of the most, if I know it, it must be one of the most famous experiments, because I certainly don't know very much about what goes on in the Harvard School of Psychology, but this is one that we all know about, we all heard about. They had one person who was the person that was the experiment was all about. And they had 9 fakes, 9 ringers. Okay, those 10 people were in a room. Now, that one person changed each time. The 9 people could be the same. That one person changed hundreds of times. They did this hundreds of times, right? And they put on a board 8, 10 lines, black lines. One clearly longer than all of the others. The second one clearly the second longest. And all the rest sort of, approximately the same. Right? And that person who was actually the guinea sheep of the experiment, right? So that person said last. The 9 people all said that the second longest line is the longest line. Right? They all said that. Over 70% of the 10th people agreed with them, even though it was absolutely obvious that there was a longer line. But they said, no, the second one, in line with what everybody else said, which is just fascinating. Right? Did they see it as longer? Were they just afraid to say that the longer one's the longer one? Even who knows? So that's just an example of how, as powerful as sight can be, it's not immutable, right? Such a fascinating experiment. I don't know what the conclusions of the experiment were. I have no idea, right? I assume they sat and talked to the people afterwards and said, of course, that you said the wrong one. Now, some of them probably said, really? Someone probably said, yeah, I did, but I didn't want to, disagree with everybody. I thought there was something wrong with me. I don't know. It's just fascinating to know why almost more than 70% of the people said the second line, which was absolutely clearly not the longest line on the screen or board or wherever they were. Which is really interesting, though. That's a cool experiment. So seeing, very powerful. Not immutable. So, but that's mazli chassid. The neshama shir l'mayla roya elakus, re'iyah shel l'mayla miseichel, sight which is beyond intellect, which is obvious. V'zeh poyol, this affects the neshama shebaguf, and the neshama that's clothed in the body, the three levels of neshama that are in the body, amuna belakus. Now, does that necessarily resonate in my conscious reality? No, that's the problem. Okay, but it's there. A source of amuna. Then there's something higher than that. V'oid bir. There's another explanation. The sherish amuna, the source of amuna, miyatzim in the sham. This is the essence of the soul. Shalamayla mi mazli chazi. It's beyond mazli chazi. Etzem in the sham. Yechida sheberish. Okay, so now just look at footnote 31, then we'll go further. Ve'ei hemshech taf ayin reish beis, which is taf reish ayin beis. Chelik aleph, perek samach aleph. Amud Kuf Yud Dalet, which it won't be Amud Kuf Yud Dalet anymore, right? Because there's new printings. But they're much better. So it's very hard to learn from the old ones once you've seen the new ones. Ve'ei gam hemshech hanal chelik beis, another place also in ayin beis. And what does the Rebbe Shab say there? Hamuna mishum de mazli chazi. Hamuna comes from a place called mazli chazi. The neshama kamesha hi lamaila, the neshama as it is above roi'ah, hi roi'ah elokus, v'chein inyan ha'emuna shemitzad etzem neshama. Similarly, the notion of emuna that comes from the essence of the soul. Those 5 words, that's it. It all comes from there, which is really astounding. Okay, so that's what the Rebbe Shab says. So now the Rebbe is going to explain the difference between those two. And we have to understand the difference between those two. What's the difference between a level of emuna that comes from tapping into mazli chazi, that somehow I become consciously connected to that level of reality, as opposed to the emuna that comes from somehow becoming consciously connected to etzem and neshama. Now again, the Rebbe does not use the words Chayin Yechida, doesn't use them. Those are the words that apply to those two levels. Doesn't use them in the whole Maimer, for whatever reason. I don't understand why. I mean, people who know a lot more than me don't understand why, so I'm putter. That which the essence of the soul, mikusheres be'elukus, is connected to elukus, hiskashus atzmis, is an essential connection. What does that mean? She'ena tluya b'siba. It's not dependent on a reason, on any event happening. Gam loy b'inyan ha're'iyah shelamayla miseichel. Even not that level of siba called seeing, which is beyond intellect. It's not dependent on that either. The reason that we'll call it, the reason that chaya shebenefesh experiences very powerful connection to the Eibishter is because it's that level of elokus sees elokus. That level of neshama sees elokus. So there's a siba, there's a reason why that level of the neshama is very powerfully connected to elokus, because it sees elokus, whatever that means up there in Atzilus. Etzem and neshama, there's no reason that etzem and neshama is a state of emuna or a source of emuna, because etzem and neshama is just an essential connection to the Eibishter that's not based on any event happening, not based on anything external happening. It's just an existential state of being. We'll discuss the difference between those two. Okay? Why one is clearly higher than the other. But yesh leimer. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu connects us to Etzem. That's what's ultimately going to happen. Okay, so when you try to understand, as we go through trying to understand these two different levels of the source of our Emunah down here in Eilam Hazeh, So the fact that a Jew is a Maimin ben Ma'amin, and if you don't believe that, well, just read the news. Right? Read what all the people coming out of Gaza are saying. It's really astounding. It's just the ones who are coming out alive, what they're saying, what kept them going when they were there. It's astounding. It's like Chassidim of the Rebbe Rashab in jail in Stalin's Russia, these people. It's Pasha Amud.
So are we, is the Rebbe basically saying that because our Chaya and Yechidus is in a place of complete godliness and sees godliness, that's why a Jew is,
It
can't be,
affects us down here.
yeah, and we can't be separated because we're actually like
The
seeing.
lack of separation the Rebbe hasn't talked about, that's going to be a function of Etzem and Neshama, not Mazli Chazi.
Oh,
Because Mazli Chazi, I can disconnect someone from that which they see.
okay.
Harvard School of Psychology, 19, whatever, 50 something, which is very early psychology, right? I mean, it was all happening in Europe in the 20th century, early 20th century, but it took a while.
If one if one Chaya and Yechida are in that place of being elevated, they affect you down here, then what does it mean to actually connect to them into
That's what we have to figure out. That's what we're trying to figure out. What it means is I will experience consciously an incredibly powerful connection to Kadosh Baruch. How do you do that? How does that happen?
Is that by bringing Chaya and Yechida down or by
Right, that's
tapping
what
into
we're
it?
going to figure out. That's what we're trying. Yes, I mean that's what it means. But what you just said doesn't mean anything to you or me.
Right.
Does that mean bringing it down? Yes. What does that mean? I don't know. Right? I mean, but you're right. That's the equation. I have to somehow bring those levels of reality down into my conscious state. Yep. That's what I have to do. And if I do that, then I'm conscious of that level of connection that those two levels experience, which must be pretty astounding. Okay, amazing. But how do I do that? Well, let's see. What?
But then they won't be elevated if you bring them down.
Who says I won't be elevated?
I don't know.
Right.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll see. That might be one of the differences between them, what you just said. Let's see. V'yesh leimar. What's the difference in these two different explanations as to the source of our emunah? The emunah ben neshama, the emunah of the neshama, meluveshes beguf, that's clothed in the body, haba, that comes, mireiyas and neshama shalamayla, from the fact that the neshama above sees elukus, he bebechinas makif. That's makif. What does makif mean? It's all encompassing. Meaning, when we say makif, we mean it doesn't penetrate into the penimius, into the conscious reality of the lower level. It's a makif. It's there, but how do we say makif intellectually? Someone will start talking about an idea and they can't really explain it to someone else. That means their understanding of the idea is makif. They know it's there. They sort of have some inkling of it, but since they can't explain it to someone else clearly in an organized fashion, that means they themselves don't really understand the idea yet. Right? Otherwise, they could explain it very clearly. And the more you understand it, the lower the level you could take that idea to, meaning you could explain it to someone on an even lower and more basic intellectual level, not in terms of their intellect, in terms of their knowledge, right? I mean, if you really understand the very deep idea in Chassidus absolutely clearly, you can explain it to someone who just heard about Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Right? Now, obviously, it depends on the idea and how much information you have to know in order to understand the idea in the first place. Okay, to say it, but if you really understand it, you should be able to bring it down to a relatively low level. And if you don't understand it, you're just going to parrot back what you heard. Right? That's why Harry Truman said when he was asked to speak, he said, "Do you want me to speak for 5 minutes or an hour?" He said, "What's the difference?" He said, "If I'm going to speak for 5 minutes, I have to prepare for an hour. If I'm going to speak for an hour, I only have to prepare for 5 minutes." Harry Truman. Meaning, if I'm going to say something real in 5 minutes, I'm going to take a long time to prepare that idea so I can bring it down into 5 minutes of talking. going to take a while to prepare it. If I have an hour to speak, so start talking and something will come out. Of course, in the hour you'll say something. General idea of what you want to say. Right? You have 5 minutes to say a drush in shul, you better know the sikha pretty well. Right? You're for bringing about the sikha, it's looking for bringing about the sikha for an hour and a half, right? You just talk about it. Right? How long did you have to prepare that sikha? You didn't. You learned it. In the middle of Farbrengen, you thought about it, so you start talking about it. Did you prepare to talk about it? No, it just, it came into your head, so you talk about it. For how long? I don't know. Might be for the next 2 hours you're Farbrengen about that sikha. In different ways, this and that and this. You want to say it over in shul? You don't have 2 hours. Maximum 7 minutes, or else it's tircha de tzibura, right? It's tsar balei. You're, treating animals improperly. Right? Right? Last week in shul, we have a rotation as to who talks in shul, and I don't necessarily say the best sikhas, but I say the shortest. But there's someone who says the longest always. So of course, last week of all weeks to be the one who did Shabbos Chaydish with Hallel and 3 Sefer Torah, and then he got up to speak, and he spoke for 20 minutes. It's a 7-minute job. That's the maximum is 7 minutes. That's the rule. 20 minutes. He thinks he spoke for 7 minutes, which was fine, but he spoke for 20 minutes at least. So then he wanted to talk at the Farbrengen. For bringing afterwards, he said, "Can I just say something?" And someone said, "No." You spoke for 20 minutes. You had more than your time, and no one actually. Whoa. So now, what's the difference between the 2 different levels of emunah? One coming from Mazli Chazi and one coming from Etzem. So the Rebbe just said the level that comes from Mazli Chazi is by definition makif. Why? Because where am I? I'm down here in Eilam Hazeh Gashmi. Where am I not? I'm not in Atzilus. So therefore, that level of experience is not something that I will naturally be able to tap into. Will it affect me? Will it have some sort of effect on me? Yeah, it'll have an effect on me, but makif, not direct. Why? Well, because I'm not there, I'm here. So I'm not experiencing directly and clearly and consciously what's going on that level of reality. Something akin to a mashal, though it doesn't work completely, but just that it helps us understand that a little bit. Where else am I not? I'm not in the past. Might there be an event in the past that has a certain makiftic effect on me? Yes. Do I even know about it? Might not even know about it. I mean, right? A good psychologist helps someone tap into those places if things are bothering them and they don't know why, right? I mean, a good psychologist will help them figure that all out. A bad psychologist will kill them, right? But a good one will really help them out. They're good at that. They're trained to do that. And the good ones are really good. I mean, they really do help people, right?
It's also the future too.
Well, yes, but no, because I guess on some level, but that's so makif because I have no clue where that is, what is, whereas at least I could, I don't know how I tap into that because it's the future, whereas tapping into the past, I can actually do that, right? Yeah. Meaning that's why I say, that's where the mushal, Moshe Rabbeinu can help me tap into the makif, right? But it'll have some sort of residual effect on my conscious reality, even though I'm not necessarily aware of it, because I'm not there. That event isn't happening to me now, but it still affected me somehow. Right? Which is interesting. It does. We know it does. Okay. So now, if it's affecting me in a negative way, so then I might have to go see someone and try to work that out because I'm doing things or acting in a way or relating to things in a way that I don't think are positive and I don't understand why. I can't get it. Like, why does this bother me so much? It shouldn't bother me. I should be able to deal with this without getting angry, upset, whatever emotional response I have that I realize is unhealthy and I don't want. But I have a very hard time controlling it. Why? Okay, so if a person's in that place and it's serious, so then go talk to someone about it and they might be able to open it up. So that's it's not a makif because it's really in there, right? But it's like a makif to the extent that I'm not consciously aware of it. It's affecting me though. The cave in neshama shelamayla, after the word makif, right? It's a makif, it's something residual, something outside of me, not something that's clothed in me. What's the difference between makif? What's the opposite of makif? Makif hislavshus, which is going to be the next word we see. The cave in neshama shelamayla, he lamayla mi hislavshus. It's beyond hislavshus. It's beyond being clothed in the body, which means it's part of my conscious reality. Lachein ver pu'ulosa ben neshama. Therefore, its effect on the neshama that is meluveshes, a meluveshes beguf that's clothed in the body. He bebechinas makif. Is residual, super conscious. It affects me, but I'm not even necessarily aware of that effect. Okay, but why is it that if you ask a Jew to put on tefillin and they haven't put on tefillin for a very long time or they've never done it, and you wrap them up, they might start crying as they're saying Shema Yisrael. Where's that coming from? One of these two places. Because consciously they're not there. Because consciously if they were there, they would have put on tefillin yesterday. Okay, but they're very powerful, or even if you just ask them to put on tefillin, might trigger in them some desire to put on tefillin, which they didn't have yesterday. And if you hadn't asked them, they wouldn't have thought of it themselves. Okay, but once you asked, it triggers something in them, and they want to do it. Okay, all sorts of explosions of what we call the pintalayid, right? Okay, now the pintalayid is usually understood as etzem and neshama. Okay, but levels of the neshama that aren't part of my conscious reality that sometimes come into a state of revelation, and therefore they cause the Jew to act in a way that is more powerfully connected to God than they usually do based on their everyday conscious life. Okay, where's that coming from? Well, it can come from chaya shebenefesh, mazli chazi, or it can come from that higher level, etzem and neshama, either of those. What's a source of Mesiras Nefesh? Either of those. We talked about that yesterday. Seichel can also be a source of Mesiras Nefesh. Right? The non-Jewish soldier is Meser Nefesh for his country based on Seichel. Right? What did Avram Avinu bring into the world? Mesiras Nefesh that comes from Etzem and Neshama. That's why Avram Avinu, no one was ever Meser Nefesh before Avram Avinu. I understand there were no soldiers in the world. No one ever did anything that somehow was an act of some sort of, self-sacrifice. No one ever did that until the Akedah.
It was all through rationality.
Well, it was all through Seichel. Avram Avinu took it to a place completely beyond Seichel. Right? That's why Avram Avinu is the tzinor, the pipeline for the Mesiras Nefesh of every single Jew. That's the difference between the Mesiras Nefesh of Avram Avinu and Rabbi Kiva, like we said earlier. Rabbi Kiva was looking for Mesiras Nefesh. He wanted Mesiras Nefesh, which generally, if you want that, where's it coming from?
Yes.
No, it's Rabbi Kiva.
Ratzon.
Chaya shebenefesh. Yifeh. Chaya ratzon. Yifeh. It's coming from Chaya shebenefesh. You're not looking for it, but if it's there, you do it. That's Avram. Avram wasn't looking for Mesiras Nefesh. He just said do it, so he did it.
That's level of Yechida.
That's it. Okay. In order for the emuna, the neshama meluveshes beguf, the neshama that's clothed in the body, tia b'pnimius, should be, pnimius means part of my conscious reality. Oh, what's the most direct way to bring that about? Hu al yedei gilui hiskashus atzmis. This is through the revelation of the essential connection to etzem and neshama. Of etzem and neshama. Let's finish the paragraph and then explain this. Ki etzem and neshama, hi etzem shel haneshama hameluveshes beguf. The essence of the neshama is also the essence of the neshama that's clothed in the body. Let's finish the sentence and then we'll come back. V'lochein ha'emuna the neshama meluveshes beguf. Therefore, the emuna of the neshama that's down here in the body, shemitzad etzem and neshama, that is a function of etzem and neshama, hi b'pnimiusa, is in an inner sense. Why? Well, because the etzem of neshama is the essence of every part of the body. Right? The mushal of that in Gashmius is your DNA. Your DNA is responsible for the color of your eyes and your basic intellectual prowess and your height, your propensity to put on weight or not, right? Your basic body sort of look, you look like a 5'5" Italian or a 6'6" Watusi guy. I mean, it's like, who do you look like? Right? It's all your DNA. Your intellect is your DNA, and okay, I'm going to be corrected because it's really evidently RNA, but it's all the same. Your hair and your fingernails are the same DNA as your intellect. It's all the same. The etzem of you is the etzem of every single part. There's no higher and lower in etzem. Intellect is much higher than movement. It's much more powerful force of the neshama. There's no question. Right? Okay. Something unique to that creature called humans. Human intellect. All animals have intellect, but it's intellect of emotions, which we also have. The ability to make decisions as to what's good for me. So all animals have that. Okay? That's called meichin shebamides, the intellect of midas. Only humans have intellect neto. We're the only ones who can do a math problem. Okay. We used to be able to do a math problem. I saw a great cartoon while I was in America. 3 American kids standing next to a newspaper box, which doesn't exist anymore, right? But a box where you see the headline of the newspaper in the window in the box. Right? And one goes, "Oh my gosh." And the other says, "Oh, that's terrible." And the other says, "What does it say?" And the headline is, 1/3 of American children are illiterate. Such a great cartoon. The third guy goes, "What does it say?" Because he can't read.
Mr. Ed.
He's fine. No, Mr. Ed. No, Mr. Ed. We're not Mr. Ed. He doesn't have a chayesh of a nefesh. He doesn't have a, but he has a nefesh. He has a nefesh. He has Bahamis. He has midas. We know he has midas.
What about the intellect of emotion is called? How do you call intellect of emotion in Hebrew?
Midot.
Only middle.
Midot
The
is
other
emotion. Midot is emotions.
And the other one, intellect of the human.
What level of the soul is responsible for intellect? Neshama. Ruach is responsible for midas.
For both the intellects, for the animals and also for the humans? Because they have intellect of emotions, right? And we have...
Well, I mean, generally when we talk about the nefesh of Bahamis, we just talk about the nefesh of Bahamis. We don't talk about nefesh, ruach, neshama, and nefesh of Bahamis, even though there theoretically are 3 such levels, but we don't really talk about it. We just talk about nefesh, right? Whereas when we talk about the godly soul, we talk about it in terms of nefesh, ruach, neshama, etc. Okay, so now what's the difference between these 2 levels that the Rebbe just said? There are 3 different levels of the connection of upper reality. I have 10 minutes to say this. Right? So I hope I prepared it right. There are 3 different levels of the connection between upper reality and lower reality, what you and I call Lamaila and what you and I call Lamata. Right? We'll start from the lowest level. The lowest level is the hislavshus of the higher level in the lower level. The clothing of the higher level in the lower level. And that's shaykh to what you and I call Ormamale. Now what has to happen? The higher level has to, and this is what Rafi was saying before, well, it sort of stops being a higher level. Well, on a certain level, yes. I mean, on a certain level, no, but on a certain level, yes. The higher level has to be mitzamsem itself, has to limit itself, and bring about certain changes in itself so that it can express itself in the lower level. Right? So, godly light will be processed so that it can express itself through kalim in basically what you and I will call finite reality. Even though the light itself, the light's not finite. Light is never finite. The light is infinite. Okay, but the light is expressing itself in finitude. What allows the light to express itself in finitude? It's called kalim. Right? So the light has to be processed so it can be clothed in the kalim and express itself in accordance with the kli. So, an example of the light of your soul that's called seichel. So that level of chokhmah comes down and is processed so that it can be clothed in the gray matter in your head, and therefore produce thoughts that, by definition, the thought isn't physical per se, but the only thing you and I can think about is physical reality. That's why we will use physical mashalim for every discussion we have about God. I think God's or. It's not or. But you and I have to say that because we can't possibly discuss anything without some connection to physical reality. Even if the connection is simply that it's metaphysical reality. Oh, it's still connected. I'm connecting it to physical. I'm describing it in terms of its non-physicality. Right? Because that's all I know. Why do I know that? Why can I do that? And we think very sophisticated thoughts. It's not that we're, the thoughts that humans think are pretty interesting stuff. Okay. What allows us to do that? The power of intellect in the soul comes down, is processed, tzimtzum achar tzimtzum, so that it can be clothed in the gray matter in the brain and express itself through that. Okay. Now, what's beautiful about that? Now, the Rebbe's not talking about that level here, because we're talking about two different levels that are not the level we just discussed, not a level of hislavshus, right? Mazli Chazi is beyond hislavshus. Etzim is even beyond that, okay? But just in order to understand those two levels, we're understanding the first, most basic level, which is what we experience all the time. Okay, what's the advantage of that level, of the higher level coming down into the lower level? A state of unbelievable unity and oneness, so that the intellect of the soul and the brain become one and work in concert with each other in order to bring about whatever it is they're supposed to bring about down here in this world. Unbelievable unity, right? So now if you were to go scrummaging around in someone's brain, you wouldn't find their neshama in there, but it's in there, right? It's in every chelkik, every atom of the brain. Okay, absolute unity. That's what's called hislavshus. A higher levels clothed in the lower level. Now, neither of the levels we talked about in this is that, right? We're talking about that in order to understand. Now we're going to go up one level. All right? Okay. So that's one level of the Lamaila connecting to the Lamata. The Lamaila comes into the Lamata. It's clothed in the Lamata. Therefore, in order to be clothed in the Lamata, it has to undergo a tremendous process of simsum, so that it can express itself in that lower realm. And what's the advantage of that relationship? Unity. The two are united, working in concert, in harmony with each other. But, and this is really what Rafa said, that higher level has diminished itself in order to bring that about. It's still a higher level, but it's diminished itself greatly in order to bring that about. Because if it shone in all its glory, it couldn't express itself down there in the finite. Okay, so now, what about the second level? This is makif. We just talked about Or Mamale, light that fills. Now, what about Or Sevev? Light that surrounds, makif. Okay, when makif relates, when the lamaila, when the light above, the infinite light above, relates to the below, on the second level, not a level of what we call hislavshus, being clothed in that level, right? But rather it shines in all its glory. What happens to the lower level? Bittul. The lower level ceases to exist. It's completely bottled. Why? Once there's a revelation of infinite, what is no longer in existence? Finite. Ceases to exist. It's completely bottled. So, the advantage of that second level is a true expression of the lamaila, of that higher level. True expression of it. Doesn't have to diminish itself. It expresses itself in all its glory. Down below, so to speak. But what does it bring about? What happens to the down below, so to speak? It's completely bottled.
This is
So there's an advantage to that. True revelation of the power of the above. What's the disadvantage? There's no below left.
this level of chaya or ruach are different.
We'll come back to that in a second. Right? Okay?
So
Yeah? That's when Lamaila is revealed below in all its glory, not in what we call Hislavshus, which is a word that's been on the page, so I'm not writing it on the board. It's been on the page 3, 4, 5 times.
So Rabbi, in Hislavshus, the higher level becomes bittul.
In Hislavshus, the higher level diminishes itself so it can express itself in the lower level, and the lower level now becomes a kli, a vessel for the revelation of the higher level. But what's being revealed? Not the real. Again, I'm using the word essential loosely here. Not a real. No, the higher level doesn't become bottle. It's not called bittul, right? It's called tzimtzum.
It's in Islam.
Hislavshus means the higher level limits itself and allows itself to be expressed in a finite form. Therefore, what am I not seeing in all its pristine glory? The higher level. It's diminished, right? Example in Gashmias, the seichel of the Rav as it's prepared to enter into the seichel of the student. Right? When the Rebbe teaches us a maimer, teaches us a sicha, do we see the fullest expression of the Rebbe's intellect?
No.
Well, no, because he has to take his intellect and transform it and process it so that when he reveals it through that incredible thing called speech, you and I get something that our kelim, that our vessels can understand. Okay. So now when the Rebbe talks Chassidus with the Friedeker Rebbe, is he talking Chassidus the same way he's talking Chassidus with us? I don't think so. Right? On a more mundane level, when two doctors are discussing a medical condition, if there's a layman standing next to them, we don't understand what they're talking about because they're using all these technical terms. They say, well, it's McCormick's syndrome. Oh, that's interesting. What did you do? Well, I used da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da. I said, you used da-da-da-da because of the problems of da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. Okay. I get it. That's interesting. Thanks, John. I'll see you later. That was interesting. Okay, and away they go. You and I were standing there, what in the world were those two guys talking about? Now, one of those guys is going to go to his class in first year medical school. And the guy who was told that by his colleagues, I just ran into a friend of mine. He told me something very interesting. Let me explain it to you. And it takes him an hour. To explain what McCormick syndrome is and how it affects the body and how that system of the body works, right? What its function is, why it's there and what it does, what's happening to this person such that it's not doing what it's supposed to do, what are the results of that on the rest of the body, right? Such that you can't hang around very long if you have that because you're going to die because something that's supposed to happen isn't happening and something isn't supposed to happen is happening, okay? So we can counter that by giving this, but there's a problem with that because that will affect another system of the body and it will, okay, and so I'm going to give him something else to deal with that and something else to deal with that. And hopefully it'll work. And these guys save a lot of lives this way, right? Okay, sometimes it doesn't work. They're just people like everybody else, but they certainly do save a lot of lives that way. Okay. They talked about it in a minute and a half in the hall. Right? And they gave this whole guy a lecture. They say this wasn't what he was going to talk about. He said, I just had a fascinating discussion I want to share with you. And his students are on the edge of their seat listening. He's going, wow, this is like unbelievable. This is what we're going to be doing? He says, yes. If you sit there and actually do the hard work necessary, this is what you'll understand. If you don't do the hard work necessary, go get a job. Unbelievable. Don't treat anybody if you don't work your tail off for the next 5 years because you might kill them, right? This is not, it's the same way you'll tell an architect, maybe you should pay attention to what the engineer is saying because if you build the building without what the engineer is telling you, it might fall and kill people. So maybe we don't want that. So could you please pay attention? Okay? People learning computers, it's irrelevant. Now, unless they're producing, what do you call that? What do you call those things you guys produce? A system that helps the engineer develop. So then you want it to work, because otherwise the building's going to fall down, right? But okay, I mean, certain things matter. Like if you don't get it right, you're going to kill someone. Okay, so we want to pay attention. Okay. So I did those two different levels. Oh, look at what time it is. Right? Those two different levels of the upper relating to the lower. What's the advantage of that first level, which is not in our mimer? Achdus, unity. Right? They're one and the same.
The first level
What?
is Islavshus or
Islavshus. What's the advantage of the second level?
It's pure.
Pure. Pure expression of the upper level. But that causes a bittul of the lower level. Right? The teacher walks in, right? Rav Yol walks in and just explains an idea in Chassidus that's resonating in his head. Boom. I haven't got a clue what he's talking about. I'm just bottle. So I don't have any intellect. My intellect is bottle. I don't know what he's talking about. Huh? Yeah? Okay. Etzem. That's what Rabbi just said. The etzem is the etzem of every level. What's etzem? Etzem is chai. Etzem is vitality. Life itself. The thing itself. It's not something separate. It's the thing itself. So when etzem is revealed below, what does it give? What it's got. Chayus. Vitality. When etzem is revealed in your neshama below, and your neshama is clothed in your goof below, what does it give the goof?
Chayes.
What chayes? Chayes! You're alive! The same life that's up there, you have down here. Because what's up there? Chayes! Essential being. And what do you get down here? Being. I'm alive. And that's the same for an animal, and the same for a plant, and the same for a blade of grass. And you. Now, obviously, etzem and neshama is higher than that which is being clothed in the blade of grass. Because what's it giving you? It's giving you an etzem connection to elokus. But etzem is chayus. The neshama is chai be'etzem. Something unique about the neshama that's different than the goof. The goof is chai. The goof is alive. But it's not chai be'etzem. What does chai be'etzem mean? That everything it touches, it gives life to. When the neshama touches something, it gives it life. When a goof touches something, it doesn't give it life. Life, not existence. Life. I'm not giving this thing life. What if somehow, I don't know what this would look like, we don't know what this would look like, but what if all of a sudden the neshama were somehow to be clothed in this cup? The cup would be alive. What does it look like, a live cup? I don't know. I haven't got a clue. Right? It's a cartoon. Fine. Let's say, okay, but they don't know either, because they never learned any Chassidus, those people. Right? Okay, so what, I don't know, but somehow this thing would be alive. And that would be really interesting. That means it would now change and grow and shrink, right? And theoretically also die, right? Because one of the interesting things about life is that it ends. Okay, but life mitzad etzem doesn't end. And that's why, interestingly enough, existence doesn't end, because matter just changes form, but it never disappears. Why? Well, because it's chai be'etzem. It just is. Right? So it doesn't disappear. Where's it go? Right? Well, it turned into dust. Well, now what? Whatever's next. At some point, that dust might end up being a daffodil. Right? Because there's going to be a daffodil that ends up being rooted in that dust. And then that daffodil will disappear and turn into who knows what. Who knows? I don't know. And the daffodil will die. Daffodils are bad. It'll turn into a tree, and the tree will drop a seed, and some bird will eat the seed. So now all of a sudden that person, which was a person who was buried in the ground and turned into dust, turned into something, and turned into a tree, and then that tree, right, now he's part of a bird. Who knows? That's what happens, right? I mean, it's crazy. Why? Because it's chai be'etzem. It doesn't disappear. Can't destroy matter. What?
Level of Yechida.
Why are you so? I said 5 times, not once does the Rebbe mention Chayur Yechida in this mimer, and you keep pushing it in there, which is really interesting. Why are you doing that?
Because you were talking about it.
I know, I understand, but it's just so interesting that the Rebbe doesn't mention it. This is etzem. Yechid is the name for Etzem, but Etzem's Etzem. Right? I'm not picking on you. It's interesting, but yes, this is Yechid. But it's just so, and it really is fascinating. The mind of the Rebbe just doesn't take us there. I don't know why. No one knows why. The Mashpim who talk about this mimer ask all the time, why doesn't the Rebbe just say Chaim Yechida? We know those words. For whatever reason, he just does it in the whole mimer. There's a footnote 67 or something.
Was this published before or after the Sikha Elimination Chassidus?
This mimer was said 15 years later.
Sorry, coming in?
15 years later.
Later. Interesting.
This mimer was said. This was written 11 years after that. Okay, so again, we're going to stop in a minute, but I just want to make sure we understand these three different levels. The level that's not talked about in our mimer, that's Islavshus. That the advantage of Islavshus is unity. Where do you end and your neshama begin? That doesn't work that way. They're just one. They're just working in harmony, one with the other. Every atom of you is both a piece of physicality and a piece of metaphysicality. Okay. That's not here. Then the two levels that are here. The level of Chayish Benefesh, which we're calling Mazli Chazi, which is the Makif. Right? The Rebbe doesn't call it Chaya, but that's what it is. Right? The Makif. When the Makif is revealed, it brings about a bittul of the lower level. So there's an advantage, true revelation of the upper level, higher level. The disadvantage, there's no lower level for it to be revealed in. Well, okay, that's the whole point, right? That when Makif is not clothed in vessels, not clothed in Kalim, and Kalim are the vehicles that allow for the revelation of the light. Wow, I'm really this. Whoa!
Oh, it's fun.
Okay. This thing, what's it revealing? Wow. This light out here, colorless. Right? You don't see any color in the light out here. Well, how do you know it has color? These kalim reveal all these different expressions of color that exist in this light. Do you see it in this light? No, not at all. Right? This light is, so to speak, a makif. You don't see anything. What does it have in it? I don't know. It's just sort of infinite expression of light. I don't see any particular reality in it at all. Is it full of those particulars? Absolutely. Well, you want to see the particulars? Let that light shine off a kli, and you'll see the blue in the light, the green in the light, the yellow in the light, the whatever that is in the light, and the pink in the light. Okay. That's what kalim do, the light. So if you want to see finite reality, so let finite reality, let infinite light be clothed in a finite kli, and you'll see the finite expression of it. Now, what do you lose? The infinite expression of it. I no longer see the infinite reality of the light as it is out here. Because out here, it can express itself in an infinite amount of color. Now it can't. It can only do this. That's all it can do. Can't do anything else. That's what kalim do. Which is really amazing. Okay. It's also so easy to understand because the Eibishter gives us eyes to see. Okay. The advantage of the Lamaila being staying a makif, it's a full expression of the Lamaila, but it's mevatel the Lamata. That'll be an expression of the Mazli Chazi. What happen? It might bring about a bittul of my conscious reality down here. I'll transcend conscious reality and just be aware of upper reality and not be aware of lower reality. So there's something very beautiful about that, but that's not the ultimate point. The third level, the etzem of the upper level, is the etzem of the lower level. In etzem, there's no upper or lower. It's all the same. What's that? The basic chayus of the neshama. The neshama is chay. It exists. It's true being. What does it give to everything it touches? Being. Right? What does it have? What is it? Being. What does it give? Being. Okay? So now, in terms of what we were talking about before, quickly, I know it's late, I'm sorry, but just one more point to make sure that we tie it all up. So then the expression of Emunah that's going to come from Mazli Chazi will be an expression of Bittul, and it might be hard for me to express that in my everyday life, because once I come back into my everyday life, I'm no longer connected to that level of complete Bittul where all there is Elokus, and I'm just transcendent of physicality. Etzem? Once there's a revelation of Etzem, then what do I become aware of? That I am one with Elokus. Now there's unity and, to use Rafi's words, a good word, pure revelation. There's the revelation of the highest level, but no bit. Still me. Why? Because the highest level is the source of me, just as much as it's the source of everything else. So it's the source of Saivev also. It's the source of that infinite level. It's also the source of the finite level. So down here in finite, I can be absolutely one with the purest expression of Elokus called Atzmos. I don't have to be bottled. Now, that doesn't, when you say don't have to be bottled, that means I don't have to go out of existence. I have to be bottled. I have to connect myself to God and not connect myself to myself. If the word I use more than any other word is I and me, I'm going to have a hard time connecting to this. Right? If I talk about God more than I talk about myself and my feelings and the way I am and the this and the that, I'm this kind of person, I'm that kind of person. I don't know if I go there, so I'm that's good, I guess, maybe not. But I'm closing myself off from something transcendent of me. If I allow myself to be simply a conduit for the revelation of that state of true being, so there's still a me, because it doesn't have to be bottled, because it's the etzem of me. But there's a state, so you have the advantage of both. There's the purity of the revelation, it's the real thing, but there's a state of absolute unity, because what is the true reality of me? That. The true reality of me is not Soivev. Soivev will be Mavatal me. Soivev is a truer reality than me, but it's not the true reality of me. What's the true reality of me? Etzem, the essence. So when that comes into a state of revelation, I can stay me. Again, not stay me in terms of me, and I have to express me and be me. No, just me as an existent being down here in Olam Hazeh. And that me down here in Olam Hazeh, walking through Olam Hazeh, aware of the fact that I did or didn't eat breakfast yet, that me can be completely and totally one with the Eibishter. Why? Because that's the real isness of me. That's my true being. My true being is not infinite light. My true being is that essence. So when that's revealed, I have the advantage of both. Unity and purity. That's what the Rebbe just said. Okay?
You have to be bottled to internalize.
Oh, that's also why I can internalize it, because it's who I really am. I can't internalize Satan. If I internalize, I think there's no need to internalize it. All I'll experience is this incredibly transcendent state. Meaning, when tzaddikim experience aliyat neshama, the neshama goes up to higher worlds. What are they no longer aware of? The lower worlds. Right. They're not here. When Chesed climbed in the Rebbe's window and the Rebbetzin was stuck in the elevator and she called up, they put a telephone in the elevator after she got stuck the first time. So she called Chesed Abishtam and said, I'm stuck in the elevator. But that's not the issue, she said. The issue is that I know the Rebbe is home and I've called him and he's not answering and I'm worried. Can you come see what's happening? So Chesed went over with his key and he put it in the lock, but the Rebbetzin had put the key on the other side so he couldn't get in. So he went home. He didn't have a cell phone. He went home and he called the Rebbetzin in the elevator and said, I can't get in the house. She said, okay, you can climb in the window. The window's always open. The window in the Rebbe's room is always open. He leaves the window open. 770 was always freezing. Remember how cold it was? 770 was freezing. The Rebbe was in 770. If you were under one of the vents, your head pounded by the time you finished davening, because there was this 62-degree air coming down on you. There was just, it was freezing in there. So the Rebbe liked it that way. So the window was open. So she told Chesed to go climb in the window. So he brought a ladder and he climbed up and he went in the window. And as he climbed in, he pushed it open a little bit so he could fit, and he climbed in the window and his feet are up there and he's like this and he picks up his head and sitting in a chair. Right there's the Rebbe, eyes wide open, looking at him. So he goes, oh my goodness gracious me, I don't want to be here. So he climbs back out the window and climbs back down and runs home and tells the Rebbetzin, the Rebbe saw him, the Rebbe's okay, his eyes were wide open, he's sitting in a chair, his eyes were wide open, and he saw me climb in the window and he's fine. So she said, okay, he'll take care of me when he finishes. He then asked the Rebbetzin to apologize to the Rebbe for climbing in the window. The Rebbe had no clue as to what he was talking about.
Wow.
The Rebbe's eyes were open, straight at him. The Rebbe wasn't here. That's not etzem. That's makif. That's going to a higher level of reality, which means this level's bottle. It's not here. It's not an achdus with this. He's sitting in the chair here, but his conscious reality is not here. It's somewhere else. That's called aliyas neshama of a tzaddik. He's not here consciously.
That way he would hold the tablecloth.
To maintain a connection here.
Is Lamaila also considered pure or no? Or it's essence?
When we say Lamaila, we mean a pure level of elokus that is coming down here. So if it comes down in these lavshus, so it loses the power of its purity, so to speak, meaning what you see isn't really what it is. Because what it is infinite and you don't see that. But so you do see what it is, but you're not down here anymore, because there is no down here.
Yeah.
Those are those two. That's what we usually talk about, is the you say with Mamala. Those are the levels talked about generally in Chassidus. Right? Our generation just talks about Etzem all the time. Up until our generation, we talk about Seviv and Mamala all the time. Rabbi takes Seviv and Mamala and turns it into Etzem, because this is, Mashiach is all about the revelation of Etzem. That's our generation. So then the third level is Etzem, where you have the advantage of both.
Yeah.
It's here, but it's unadulterated.
And this mimer doesn't even say the name for it. It says
Well, the Rebbe didn't say Lamai. Yeah, he said Lamai. Yeah, the Rebbe used those words Lamai Lamata. Right. I mean, in terms of what I was talking, the Rebbe doesn't say what I just said.
Right.
It's just we have to understand that in order to understand what the Rebbe said.
So Matan Torah is like it was like a mix of
so
Makif
that's
and
really interesting,
Drapshus.
right?
Like it's in the mix.
Well, sort of. But what happened to all of them?
At a certain point, they were batal, but it
died.
but it was pure for a little bit.
Right.
Base slapshus, like in a certain way.
Well, it wasn't Bislavshus, that's the problem, that's why they died. And that's an interesting question. Why? If it was a Gilu Yetzim, why did they have to die? But they
Why
died.
didn't they die?
No,
In
they
the
did
beginning, saying it wasn't right away.
What do you mean in the beginning? As soon as the Abishah said, what's the beginning?
I thought they were like able to like hear a little bit and then passed away.
I don't know. It just basically says that the Abishah said and they all died. They were pushed back 12 kilometers. They ended up 12 kilometers further from the mountain than they were before that. So that's an interesting question as to why it is, why so it's clearly that was not a pristine Gilu Yetzim. Because if it was, they theoretically could have been stayed in a state of their own.
And it wasn't Etzem, it was Makif.
I guess that's an interesting question. Not sure.
And when you internalize Makif, that becomes
You can't
slapshus.
internalize Makif.
So then, what's the effect on us? There's no effect on us.
Makif. I can then I can respond to that makif, in terms of Chassidus of Veata, that'll call them Ritzoy and Shiur. After the Ritzoy, which is getting up to the level of makif, I have to come back into Olam Hazeh, take the energy and the connection that I experienced there, and now express it down here, but I'm expressing it down here in the state of Islavshus, not in the state of makif. Makif is makif, it can't be in Islavshus, that's the nature of it.
So for Hishlapshus, you said the higher level, it limits itself and then comes to lower level, it gets purified and goes in the
No, I didn't say anything about purified. Didn't say that. Didn't say anything about purified.
It becomes infinite.
Said that it comes down into the lower level
It gets
and
processed.
is processed.
It gets processed and it goes and
And now it's revealed